Hi, everybody. Doug and Aleya. And in this session, I, we want to talk about something that I stumbled across about a week ago, and just an idea. And then I started doing research. And it turns out that what I thought was true. And that is how we are programmed to fail in relationships. How we are programmed to fail in relationships. Now, most people think that you grow up in childhood and you go into adulthood and you start dating in high school or maybe even junior high school and you start learning about relationships. But I think everybody can relate to the idea that when you get into relationships, it's not always smooth and it doesn't work well. And there are a lot of relationships that exist today in adult relationships that are comfortable, but they're not deeply emotionally intimate. And people are not connected as deeply as they want to be. And then there are plenty of other relationships where there are fights and arguments, and people stick together because there's some connection, but really the relationship itself is not very satisfying. And I thought it would be really interesting to talk about how it is that we are programmed to fail in relationships by our parents, and how they were programmed to fail in relationships by their parents. And this goes back for probably thousands of years. The first departure point for all of this is to understand, as I've said many times, we are 98% emotional and only 2% rational. So that means that if we want to be a full functioning human beings, we have to learn how to master our emotions. And the problem is that since our parents, generally speaking, were not emotionally competent, they couldn't teach us, either by modeling their behavior or by just instructing us, how to become emotionally competent. Instead, what parents do, and this is almost universal, is that they emotionally invalidate their children. And I'll talk about that in a second. I'll just say that emotional invalidation, again, in my opinion, and from what I've observed 40 years as a peacemaker looking at thousands and thousands of conflicts, is the most insidious and pervasive form of emotional abuse that exists. It's everywhere. And it's so everywhere that nobody even notices what they're doing. In fact, parents will tell you that they are emotionally invalidating their children to toughen up because it's a tough world out there. But brain science shows and developmental psychology research shows that emotional invalidation is the worst thing you can do to a child. So let's talk about that for a second. So remember when you were 2 years old and you're outside running around and you fall over and you skin your knee. What are you told? Aleya, what are you told?
Toughen up. It's not that bad. You'll get over it. That's okay. You'll be all right.
For guys, it would be stuff like, big boys don't cry, don't be a sissy, don't be a girly girl, you got to be a big man, rub dirt on it, it doesn't hurt, and so forth and so on. And the experience that almost every person has, at least in Western culture, is that their parents invalidate their emotional experience. Now, this does a couple of things that are really harmful. First, parents, if they're good, have to be emotional coaches. They've got to help their children navigate the process of building an emotional database. And if that process does not occur, then what children experience is a deep hurt. And in order to prevent loss of connection, children build walls around themselves. And they stuff away their negative emotions. And they know they're not allowed to have feelings, or to have feelings is to be weak or bad or evil or irrational. And if they want to be adults, they can't show feelings. And this is true for both men and women. This is not sex or gender biased in any way. So they go through childhood being told that emotions are bad. And since they're hanging out with their peers, other children, as they're growing up, and those children are learning the same thing, when they display emotions amongst their friends immediately put them down. and tell them, don't feel that way. In fact, it's almost like there's an emotional policing that goes on there. That if you step outside the norms of behavior that say that emotions are bad or evil or weak, that other people will step up to put you down right away for feeling your emotions as a real human being. And so we learn that emotions are bad, and we build up all this pain inside of ourselves, and we wall off the pain. We build big walls around us. We become numb. We engage in activities that protect us from feeling. One of the things that we see in this young generation is the attraction to video games. Now, this is not the first generation to be attracted to stuff like video games, but they get absorbed and it becomes addictive because it's a way of escaping. It's a way of finding emotional safety. And really, what every human being needs more than anything else is to feel emotionally safe. And yet, we don't feel emotionally safe. Our parents were not emotionally safe for us. Our brothers and sisters were not emotionally safe for us. Our friends weren't emotionally safe for us because if we were vulnerable, we get immediately put down as being soft.
And because of our wall, that prevents us from going within and feeling safe.
That's right. So we don't even feel safe with our own emotions. And so now you come into adulthood, and biology starts driving you to relationship, sexual attraction. What tools do you have to make that relationship work at a deep and intimate level? Every person coming into a relationship wants connection, wants emotional safety, wants intimacy,
Validation.
and wants to feel love. Where do you learn those skills? Those skills should have been learned in childhood, and they weren't taught to you at all. You were programmed exactly the opposite. You were programmed that emotions are bad, intimacy is bad. They tell you that love is good, but does anybody?
But no tools of how to do it.
No tools and no modeling.
No.
No modeling. And you're emotionally invalidated for 18 years. And maybe you go to college or maybe you move out and start working, and you have no idea of how to create emotional safety for yourself or how to create emotional safety for those around you. Certainly don't know how to create emotional safety for somebody that you fall in love with, you want to have a relationship with. And all of this is because you were unconsciously programmed by your parents to have romantic and relationship failure as an adult. And they don't even know they programmed you. It's not like they're evil people. They just don't know. And this goes back for thousands and thousands of years. Now, part of the problem is we've gone through some major shifts in culture, especially in the last 150 years. It used to be that you would be born as a baby, and if you survived your first 5 years, more likely than not, you were living in subsistence existence on a farm somewhere, probably rural. And as soon as you were old enough to start being a producer, you started doing chores. As a 4 or 5-year-old, you had chores to do, and you started being a producing member of the family. And the obligation of the family was to feed you and shelter you, but not to love you, not to teach you emotional competency. The whole thing was all about survival. Well, that all shifted back during World War II and at the end of World War II, when there were mass migrations to the cities and the population in the United States or in North America shifted from being a rural agrarian population to being an urban population. Now, children were no longer necessary as production units on a farm for the most part, unless they lived in a rural area. But mostly they were just people building a family because that was the thing to do. And yet, no tools were introduced to parents to teach them that now that we're in an urban culture, for example, and we're not in a rural subsistence living situation, that we now have the ability to teach our children how to be emotionally competent. Instead of that happening, what happened was that the old rules and norms from an agrarian lifestyle were brought into the city and brought into suburbia. The same kind of pain and abuse continued, and it continues to this day.
And it got really codependent. Because as we moved into this urban environment and more people are around each other, then the children are taught, or you were taught, that it's your responsibility to respect your mother and father, love your mother and father, abide by them, and it's all about them, the people in your life that hold the authority and the power, and bowing to that. And your needs were not important. So if you did start to tend to your needs, then you were selfish and you got shamed. So it created this really messy system in our relationship dynamics of being codependent, never thinking about yourself, never tend to yourself, don't learn how to soothe yourself deep in your core, don't really deeply love the light that flows within you. Oh, so now you're so empty inside and you've got the wall, the shell. So now you're in physical pain, emotional pain, obviously relationship pain, empty, empty, empty because you've given everything to everyone and you wonder why you're not fulfilled in relationship. And then you're resentful because nobody's meeting your needs. So there's so many layers with this whole dynamic of relationships, of how we're in relationship with each other intimately and just in our family structures and our friend structures. And then it also ties into how you're in relationship with your body, which is part of the work that I do. So just a little segue on that one around the codependence.
So the question is all lost? And the answer is no.
Oh,
You can learn how to be in a relationship. You can learn how to develop relationship success. All you have to do is develop the right kinds of tools. And the tool, the fundamental, the foundational tool, it's now what I consider to be a foundational skill of life, is affect labeling. The idea that you will listen to emotions of your partner and reflect back those emotions with the you statement. So, just to give you a quick example, I could say to Aleya, Aleya, you're really upset, you're really angry, and you're frustrated. You
and
don't
I don't feel heard. I don't feel
you don't
heard.
feel heard, and you don't feel appreciated.
I don't feel respected.
You don't feel respected. Nobody's listening to you.
No, no one cares.
No one cares, and you feel really sad.
And I'm mad. I'm really angry.
It really pisses you off and makes you mad, and you feel abandoned and betrayed,
I do. I feel really rejected.
and you feel rejected, and you feel a lot of grief around this, and ultimately
Yeah,
you feel like you're not worthy of being loved, and
right.
you feel unlovable.
Yeah, I feel unloved. And what am I doing wrong? And shame.
You feel a lot of shame. So notice how she's finished with a sigh. That's when you know you're done. That's called listening another person into existence. And when you learn how to listen another person into existence, you deeply validate them at an emotional level. You create emotional safety, and you create deep intimacy and trust, because it's not about you. It's about validating your partner's emotional experience. Aleya, what's the experience like when you were validated that way?
Your whole focus was entirely on me. It wasn't me needing to appreciate you or respect you. You let yourself completely focus on what I was going through. It was a huge relief that you weren't trying to figure out why did I feel that way? You weren't asking me questions because then I would have had to come up with something. Maybe I don't even know what it is. And then you also weren't trying to fix it. And if you had gone to fixing it, then I would have actually gone into deeper shame because I was thinking, okay, there must be something wrong that I'm feeling this way. So I felt this incredibly big space for me just to feel these feelings. And when you validated, then I could connect in with a deeper emotion underneath it. Now, granted, you and I have been practicing this and doing this in our own relationship for over a decade, but just modeling that, you go deeper in. I felt deeper into another layer of emotion, another layer of emotion. So I started becoming more aware of these emotions, and then I finally hit the mother lode. And then I reconnected in with myself as I just felt that emotion. It wasn't about now I have to fix the shame or understand why I'm in shame. Just no, I just had to land in that deeper emotion. And then I felt my body re-engage, relax, reconnect. So that's what it was. That was the experience.
So to sum all of this up, if you are in a relationship and you are finding that it's not as fulfilling as you want it to be, or worse, you're in fights and arguments, you're in a combat zone, recognize that first of all, you were programmed for that by your parents. It's not your fault. And your parents were programmed by their parents, and this goes back a long, long time with all of this emotional abuse and emotional invalidation that we now know is extremely harmful to children. And also recognize that there's a way out. That if you develop your own emotional competency and learn how to listen to other people into existence, which does not take long, that you can change this dynamic. And the trick, of course, is you have to want to change. But there is hope. And we'll put links in the comments in the posted comments below where you can go find out more information about this if it's of interest to you. Aleya, anything else?
That's it.
All right, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.